everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the April My Creative Scrapbook Limited Edition kit. This month I've made several layouts with hexagons, and this was the first layout that I made that kind of got me started on that hexagon kick. For this layout I cut out a whole bunch of white hexagons. I layered 3 together. I just used some ATG adhesive and layered them on top of each other. And then on the top of those 3 white cardstock hexagons, I put a pattern paper hexagon. I love making shapes like this. I feel that I can use up some scraps of cardstock that I have. And I also like that I could use small pieces of pattern paper. You really don't need a very big piece to make a hexagon of this size. This month, in the limited edition kit, we received this gorgeous Simple Stories collection called Simple Vintage Life in Bloom. I just love the bright colors, and there are also some touches of black, and I really like that as well. So I'm using my mat and I'm arranging these hexagons, just trying to figure out how I want them arranged on the page. I cut out 3 of each of several pattern papers, and now that I've decided where I want them on my layout, I put a piece of white cardstock behind them, and I'm using a pencil and just drawing a little kind of circle behind each of the hexagons just so I know where they're going to go on the layout, and then I took a picture so that I would remember exactly where to put them. The paper that I'm using is from my stash. It's a thick piece, 120-pound smooth white cardstock, and I've covered it with some Liquitex gesso. I'm using the packaging technique, and the first color that I'm using in the background is a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist called Sunlight. This is a bright yellow color, and I'm using my plastic to squish the color down in the same diagonal direction that my hexagons are going to be placed on the layout. I used my heat tool and I dried the background, and then I went in with another spray. This spray is called a Plain Jane Matte Mist, and the color is saffron, so it's a little bit of a darker color, not quite as bright, and I thought that this went well with the yellow color that was in the paper collection. I don't always, but I always like to use more than one shade of the same color. I think that that creates a lot of depth to the color in the background. And now I'm using a third color. This is a Prima Color Bloom 2 spray, and the name of the color is Spring Dandelion. And this is a bright yellow color. I think it's a little bit different from the other 2, and I think that it's a good color to use to complete this yellow background. It's extremely yellow, but you'll see in a little while that the hexagons do cover up the majority of the background. Just hints of yellow kind of peek out between the hexagons and around the outside of them. Now I'm adding some splatters of the Spring Dandelion color. I love to add splatters. I add quite a few of them to this layout. Whenever I add splatters to a background, I spread them all over the background, but I like to concentrate them all around the edge of the large area of color. Now I am sprinkling some water on the background, and then I'm going to take my roll of paper towel and roll it over the top. That will lift up a little bit of the color, and it just kind of creates a cool effect, and it makes some additional variation in the color. I'll usually sprinkle the water over the color at least twice. Now I wanted to add a little bit more color in just a couple of spots, so I'm again using that Prima Spring Dandelion color. Then I use my heat tool and I dry the background. I make sure that I dry the background in between each layer of color. That way the layers will build up on top of each other and create richer color. I've received quite a few comments on my channel about scrapbookers who like the idea of making a mixed media background but are a little afraid to try it out. I think that this type of background, like the one that I'm making in this video, is a great place to start. You just need some paper, you need a little bit of gesso, and then you need some kind of a spray or even just watercolors and a piece of plastic, and you can give it a try. The worst that can happen is you have to throw out one piece of paper. So I hope that you'll give it a try if you're thinking about it. Once the background was fully dried, I began adding some stamping. I'm using Staz On ink in jet black, and I have a number of background stamps that I keep all in one spot because I use them so frequently on my backgrounds. This one was from a former My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. It's a small Prima stamp, and I love using this stamp to create text on the background. I've already moved on to my second stamp. This is from a Tim Holtz stamp and stencil pack. It's a whole bunch of dots. I like the way they're different sizes, and I also like the way all of the dots are on the smaller side. This stamp kind of looks like splatters, and you can see that I'm putting it all around the outside of the area of color, but I'm also putting some of the stamping on the inside as well. I just think that it adds a lot to the look of the background. When I'm creating a background, I don't tend to use an acrylic block with background stamps. I just tend to hold them, and I feel like I can get a little bit more variation by pressing down on one side or just using part of the stamp than I can when I have an acrylic block. Of course, if I want the entire image, then I'll use the acrylic block. Otherwise, it's much harder to get an entire image to stamp crisply. And here is another one of my favorite stamps. This is a mesh stamp. I'm not sure if it's Studio Calico or Tim Holtz, but I add this to a lot of my layouts too. Even though I use that dot stamp on the background, I wanted to add some splatters. The splatters are a little bit bigger than the stamping, and I wanted some really dark spots on the background. So I decided to use this watered down black acrylic paint, and I just tap on the top of the cap, and it makes some nice size splatters on the background. I'm going to add a few more splatters in a moment. First, I'm going to clean up just a couple of spots where I got some splattering and I did not want it there. But I don't add a ton of black splatters. I usually try to be a little bit more conservative than I am when I'm adding white splatters because, of course, it's easier to overdo the black splatters on a background like this than the white splatters that won't be quite as noticeable. And this is also watered down white acrylic paint, and I am just tapping on the top of the container again. If I wanted to make smaller splatters, I would use a paintbrush and I would tap on the paintbrush with my scissors. That makes some smaller splatters. But here I wasn't worried about having some larger splatters. The only problem with adding acrylic paint splatters to backgrounds is that it takes a little bit of time to dry, and sometimes I'm not very patient, but I put the layout aside and now I'm going to work on my hexagons. I wanted to ink the sides of them, so I'm using some distress ink in black soot and a dauber, and I am going to ink the edges of all 6 sides of all of these hexagons. And adding the black inking to the hexagons will help them to kind of pop off the background a little bit. And usually when I ink the edges of shapes like this, I end up inking my fingers quite a bit too. Now my background is completely dry and I'm arranging the hexagons and putting them back where I had them before. You can't see it right now, but I am using my phone to help me to put all those hexagons in the places that I had them before. I was just thinking the other day how I use my phone camera for so many things, both scrapbook and non-scrapbook related, but mainly scrapbook related. And it's hard to imagine going back to a time when I can't take a picture of whatever I want to remind myself of something. I tend to get ideas for layouts from a lot of different places, and I am frequently taking pictures of things. I guess I could always sketch something out, but it's so much easier to just take a picture and then refer back to it. I have all of my hexagons arranged the way they were before, and now I'm using some ATG adhesive and I'm attaching them down to the layout. Usually I find that when I use modeling paste, I have to use another wet adhesive on the background, but because I just use stamping and a little bit of acrylic paint, these hexagons will stay put with the ATG adhesive. I keep my T-square handy because I want to keep checking to make sure that the hexagons are lined up straight. I don't want to make a mistake at this point, and then that mistake would carry on right down the line and I would have a crooked mess at the end. So I am using my T-square regularly to make sure that everything is lined up correctly. As I was arranging the hexagons, I was thinking that there really seemed to be a need for one more hexagon in the lower right-hand corner. So I went ahead and layered some white cardstock on top of each other, and then I cut out another hexagon from one of the pattern papers, and I think that that makes that whole cluster of hexagons look more complete. I have a photo of both of my daughters. I have it mounted on some white cardstock and then again on some black cardstock, and I use my Creative Memories circle cutters to cut those out. I just love those circle cutters, and probably the first thing that I bought for scrapbooking, and I still use them all the time. I added some fun foam behind the photo to help support it in a few places, but I realized that I had put a little bit too much on the back of the photo, so I peeled a little bit up and then put it back into place. And now I'm adding some die cuts to the layout. There was this big, beautiful flower die cut, but it was just a little bit too big for the place that I wanted to put it, so I cut it in half, and then I decided to use the other half on the other side of the photo. And I felt happy with the way that looked, so I attached that down right away. And then I knew I was going to use this title. It's called Life is Beautiful, and it fit really nicely right underneath the photo. And then I had selected a number of other die cuts and embellishments. There were some really beautiful images of butterflies in this collection. So I have a couple of different die cut pieces, and I placed those on a couple of different hexagons on the layout. I liked the sentiment that said believe in yourself, but it was just a little bit too long. I ended up using that on another layout. I also like the flying bee die cuts, so I included 3 of those. I spread them around the outside of the layout. I used a piece of paper towel just to clean up a couple of spots that were on the background. And now I'm using ATG adhesive and I'm attaching the butterflies down. I kind of shocked myself on this layout because I made some really quick decisions. I usually move things around and make a lot of changes, but on this layout, things just seem to come together rather quickly. Not saying I didn't move anything around, but I was happy with where I put the embellishments, and I just went ahead and attached them down to the page. There were a whole lot of embellishments in this month's kit. There were tons of sentiments. I picked out a chipboard one that said love this, and then 2 stickers that said bloom and favorite, and those were the last touches on the layout, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. I really hope that you enjoyed watching it. I really enjoyed working with the Simple Vintage Life and Bloom collection this month and getting all of the different embellishments that went along with it in this kit. If you are interested, you can check out all of the kits on the My Creative Scrapbook website. The link is in the description box. I recommend checking out the My Creative Scrapbook Instagram account. You can get lots and lots of inspiration and see lots and lots of layouts that are made with this month's kits there. I hope you have a fantastic day. I will see you all again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.